It was 2:07 in the morning when the knocking started. Not the kind of knock you ignore, not the kind you mistake for a drunk neighbor. This was controlled, heavy, deliberate. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I remember staring at the ceiling, heart already racing before I even checked the time. 2:07 a.m. Nobody brings good news at 2:07 a.m. When I opened the door, my neighbor Marcus was standing there in a hoodie, barefoot, holding his phone like it was something fragile or dangerous. He didn't say hello. He didn't apologize for waking me up. He just said, "Daniel, I think someone's been going inside your house." I almost laughed. I live alone. I don't give out spare keys. I don't have roommates. But then he turned his phone toward me. And I watched myself leave for work that morning. And 5 minutes later, I watched another man walk up my driveway, unlock my front door, and walk inside like he belonged there. I didn't recognize him at first, but I would. Because the worst part wasn't that someone was watching me. The worst part was who sent him. I stood on my porch in bare feet, the cold concrete biting into my skin, while Marcus replayed the footage. 8:12 a.m. There I was, coffee in hand, locking my door like I always do. Routine, automatic, safe. 5 minutes later, a silver sedan rolled slowly down the street and stopped just past my mailbox. The driver didn't rush, he didn't hesitate. He stepped out, adjusted his jacket, and walked up my driveway like he'd memorized the cracks in the pavement. My throat tightened. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a key, my key, and unlocked my front door. No hesitation, no panic, just confidence. The video fast-forwarded. 43 minutes later, he walked back out, calm, composed, locked the door behind him. I couldn't breathe for a second. "That's today?" I asked. Marcus nodded. "And it's not the first time." He swiped again. 3 more clips. Different days. Same pattern. Same car. Same man. Same key. The world didn't feel stable anymore. It felt tilted, like something invisible had shifted underneath my life. I pushed past Marcus and stepped back inside my house. Everything looked normal. Couch in place. TV remote where I left it. Kitchen spotless. But it wasn't normal. Someone had stood in my living room, breathed my air, walked down my hallway. I went straight to my office. Desk drawer slightly misaligned, laptop lid angled differently. Tiny details. But they were wrong. You know your space when you live alone. You know the exact way things sit, the exact angle of your chair. And something had moved. "Did he take anything?" Marcus asked from the doorway. I checked quickly. Cash in the drawer, still there. Watch on the dresser, untouched. Gaming console, still connected. Nothing missing, which made it worse. Because if he wasn't stealing, he was looking. I opened my laptop. Password worked. Desktop normal. But when I opened my file explorer and checked recent activity, my stomach dropped. My personal documents folder had been accessed. 3 PDFs opened. Tax returns, investment summaries, property records. I felt heat rush into my face. He wasn't burglarizing me. He was auditing me. My pulse started pounding in my ears. "Call the cops," Marcus said quietly. I nodded, but my brain was moving faster than fear now. Who breaks into someone's house just to copy financial documents? Not a random thief, not some desperate addict. This was targeted. Deliberate, strategic, and then something inside me clicked. The man looked familiar. I couldn't place it yet, but I'd seen that face before. Not recently. Years ago. At a family gathering. A barbecue maybe. Standing near my brother, laughing. My chest tightened. No, that didn't make sense. I hadn't spoken to my brother in months. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies. Still, the memory kept trying to surface. The scar near the eyebrow, the way he carried himself. Confident, calculated, like this wasn't his first time doing something like this. Marcus stepped closer. "Daniel, you okay?" I realized my fists were clenched so tight my knuckles had turned white. Someone had my key. Someone had been inside my home multiple times. And it wasn't random, it was organized. The safety I'd taken for granted, the quiet, predictable life I'd built, suddenly felt fragile, exposed. I looked back at the paused frame of the man standing in my hallway. For a split second, he glanced toward the camera Marcus had installed on his garage. And in that frozen image, his face was clear. That's when it hit me. I knew exactly where I'd seen him. And if I was right, this wasn't a break-in. It was the beginning of something much worse. I didn't sleep that night, even after Marcus left. Even after I double-checked every lock in the house twice. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying that frozen frame in my head. That face. I knew it. And the more I tried to ignore the connection, the clearer it became. His name was Brandon Pike. He used to show up to family events with my older brother, Adrian. Not officially introduced as anything, just a friend. The kind of guy who hovered around the edges of conversations but listened carefully. I hadn't seen him in years. At least I thought I hadn't. Adrian and I weren't close growing up. Not because we fought, because we didn't compete on the same field. He was loud, charismatic, the golden child. Quarterback in high school, business degree, big personality, big plans. I was quiet, analytical. The kid who preferred numbers over crowds. Our parents never compared us out loud. They didn't have to. Everyone else did it for them. Adrian's going places. Daniel's smart. There's a difference in tone when people say those things. Adrian built businesses, started ventures, took risks. Some worked, some didn't, but he always bounced back. I built stability, corporate job, structured income, safe investments, predictable life. We weren't enemies. We just drifted. Phone calls turned into texts. Texts turned into birthday messages. Then silence. Still, he was my brother. And brothers don't send strangers into your house. Right? Around 4:30 a.m., I got up and went into my office again. I opened my laptop and logged into something I hadn't checked in a long time. My grandfather's family trust. When he passed 5 years ago, he structured everything carefully. Properties, investments, cash reserves. Adrian and I were equal beneficiaries. I didn't rely on it. I didn't even think about it much. But as I scrolled through the dashboard, something caught my eye. Recent activity notifications, administrative review requests, filed by Adrian. My stomach tightened. I clicked. There it was, a formal petition requesting reassessment of co-beneficiary management capability. My name listed. Reason cited? Concerns regarding financial judgment and long-term asset protection. I read it twice, then a third time. My hands started shaking. He was questioning my ability to manage my own portion of the trust. If successful, oversight control could shift to him. I felt something sharp in my chest. This wasn't just about curiosity. This wasn't about sibling tension. This was positioning. And suddenly the break-ins didn't feel random anymore. If someone were trying to build a case against me, they'd need information, financial patterns, personal vulnerabilities. Anything that could paint me as unstable or irresponsible. My breathing grew shallow. Brandon wasn't stealing, he was gathering. By sunrise, the exhaustion hit me all at once. But under the exhaustion was something worse. Doubt. Had Adrian always resented me? There was a moment, years ago, I'd almost forgotten it. After Grandpa's will was read, we were standing outside the attorney's office. Adrian laughed it off. "Guess we're partners now," he said. But there was something in his eyes, something tight. "You don't even need it," he added. "You've got your safe little life." Safe little life. I didn't think anything of it then. Now it echoed differently. I walked through my house slowly that morning. Living room, kitchen, hallway, trying to feel normal in a place that suddenly wasn't. The air felt different, like it remembered being disturbed. Someone had stood here on purpose. Someone working for my own blood. And what hurt wasn't just the invasion. It was the possibility that this had been planned, calculated. That my brother, the person who used to teach me how to ride a bike, might be building a case to legally erase me. I leaned against the kitchen counter and pressed my palms into the cold marble. If I confronted him without proof, he'd deny everything. He'd smile, explain it away, turn it around. He was good at that. No, if this was really him, I needed confirmation, because suspicion fractures families. But proof? Proof destroys illusions. And I needed to know whether I was about to lose my brother, or discover I never really had one. By noon, the fear was gone, not because I felt safe, because something colder had replaced it. Focus. I called in sick to work and sat at my desk with a legal pad, writing down everything I knew. Dates of the break-ins, times I'd left the house, trust modification filings, the name Brandon Pike. When you strip emotion out of betrayal, what's left is pattern. And patterns don't lie. Marcus came over that afternoon with coffee and an external hard drive. I upgraded your interior cameras, he said. If he comes back, we'll have him in 4K. There was something grounding about the way he said it. No drama, no panic, just action. Why are you helping me this much? I asked. He shrugged. Because someone crossed a line. Simple. I respected that. The first thing I needed to know was whether Brandon was acting alone. I started with social media. Brandon Pike wasn't flashy. No public Instagram. No loud LinkedIn updates. But buried in tagged photos from years ago, I found him, standing beside Adrian at a launch party for one of my brother's short-lived startups. Caption read, "Big moves coming. Loyalty matters." The post was 5 years old. But loyalty to who? I cross-referenced dates. The first break-in happened 3 days after Adrian filed that petition to review the trust. Not weeks, not months. 3 days. My pulse ticked up. That wasn't coincidence. That was coordination. I logged back into the trust portal. This time I downloaded everything. Every filing, every modification, every timestamp. Then I noticed something else. Adrian had requested copies of my recent tax documentation through the trustee's office. Claimed it was for portfolio strategy alignment. I had never authorized that, which meant he didn't get everything. Which meant he might be trying to get the rest. Through my house. That's when I made the decision. If someone is building a case against you, you build one back. But clean, legal, undeniable. I reached out to a private investigator recommended by a colleague. Elena Vargas, former homicide detective. Calm voice, sharp eyes. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. I handed her a folder with printed screenshots, timestamps, and footage stills. She flipped through it slowly. "You think your brother hired him?" "I don't think," I said. "I'm starting to see it." She looked at the freeze frame of Brandon walking into my house. "No forced entry?" "No." "Then he has a key." I nodded, which meant someone either copied it or gave it to him. She closed the folder. "Do you want confirmation?" she asked. "Or confrontation?" Confirmation. Because if I confronted Adrian without proof, he'd gaslight me. He always had a way of bending narratives, making you question your own memory. Elena gave one short nod. "Then we'll follow the money." The next few days felt different. Not helpless. Strategic. Every time I left for work, my chest tightened, but not from fear, from anticipation. If Brandon came back, I wanted it on record. I also changed something. I shifted my routine. Left early one morning, came home midday another. I wanted to see if he was tracking my patterns or reporting them. On Thursday, at 1:17 p.m., I got a notification. Motion detected inside living room. My heart slammed against my ribs. I was still at work. I opened the live feed. There he was. Brandon, standing in my house. Calm, methodical. He walked straight to my office. Didn't even glance around. He knew exactly where to go. This wasn't exploration. This was repetition. I watched him sit in my desk chair, open my laptop, plug in something. A flash drive. My hands started shaking, but this time I didn't panic. I recorded the screen from my phone. Evidence. Pure and clear. He stayed 36 minutes. Before leaving, he paused near the hallway mirror for just a second, and I swear he smiled, not at himself, at the situation. That smile did something to me. It stripped away the last layer of denial. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was operation, and operations have leadership. That night, Elena called. "I found something," she said. My pulse steadied. "Brandon Pike has received recurring transfers over the last 6 months." "From who?" There was a brief silence. "An LLC registered under Mercer Strategic Holdings." My breath stopped. That was Adrian's company. Not rumored, not speculated. Documented. The room felt very still. "You're sure?" I asked. "Yes." The final thread of doubt snapped quietly inside me. He wasn't just suspicious. He was involved. And if he was desperate enough to invade my home, then he was more desperate than I ever realized. Elena continued. "Your brother's business has outstanding private loans, high interest, aggressive repayment schedules." I closed my eyes. How bad? Bad enough to need leverage. Leverage, that's what I was, not a brother. An obstacle. A variable. Something to remove. I sat alone in the dark that night. Lights off. House silent. No fear anymore. Just clarity. Adrian wasn't trying to steal cash. He was trying to build a narrative. If he could frame me as financially unstable, irresponsible, unfit to manage inherited assets, he could petition for control, and no one would question it. Not if he had documentation, not if he had concern. I whispered into the quiet room. You should have just asked, because if he had come to me honestly, if he'd said he was struggling, I would have helped him, without hesitation. But instead, he chose deception. And once someone chooses deception over honesty, they don't get the benefit of family anymore. They get consequences. By the 4th day, my calm focus had hardened into determination. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was reading patterns, connecting dots, following breadcrumbs. The first thing I noticed was the subtle but consistent timing of Brandon's visits. Every time I left for work, he showed up within 5 minutes. Every weekend, when I went grocery shopping, he was there. Always the same deliberate pacing, never rushing. Always precise. Someone had clearly mapped my routine. And whoever did this wasn't sloppy. They were methodical. But then, Marcus found something I hadn't considered. A hidden camera in my mailbox. Small, nearly invisible. Its lens angled to capture the driveway and my front door from the corner. He had recorded Brandon retrieving something I'd never noticed before. Small packages, envelopes, and even printed statements I thought had been safely filed away. The implications hit me immediately. Adrian wasn't just curious. He wasn't just gathering financial data. He was building a case, a dossier, something that could be used against me in court, in front of trustees, or even against my reputation. I remembered a faint argument during a family dinner months ago. Adrian had casually mentioned, "You're too careful sometimes, Daniel. Some things just require a little oversight." I had laughed it off. Now it made sense. Oversight, yes, but on me. Always me. That evening, I went through every digital file in my home office, cross-referencing the dates of Brandon's break-ins with the dates of financial documents and tax records. Patterns emerged. Bank statements accessed. Investment portfolios opened. Trust documents touched, some removed from folders. And then, I noticed something bigger. Adrian had been slowly consolidating influence over family assets. Hidden clauses in trust filings, unsigned proxy authorizations, and even attempts to manipulate our parents into believing I was careless with inheritance responsibilities. I stared at the screen. My hands shook, not from fear, but from anger. He wasn't just spying. He was orchestrating a full takeover, a legal and financial coup against his own brother. I sat on the edge of my couch, head in my hands. Every memory of Adrian from childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood replayed with new clarity. That charm, that confidence, that perfect older brother facade, it was all a mask. A mask to hide envy, resentment, and greed. Everything he had done, every interaction, every casual friendly suggestion, suddenly had the potential to be weaponized. And the worst part? He had been planning this for months, maybe years. Calculated, patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. My life, my home, my privacy, my inheritance, all of it was at risk. And yet, oddly, I felt a sense of release, clarity, focus. I wasn't powerless anymore. That night, I made a decision. No more fear, no more waiting. I would get evidence, legal evidence, complete proof of every intrusion, every payment, every correspondence, every deliberate attempt to compromise me. I wasn't going to confront Adrian yet, not with questions, not with accusations. I was going to build a record so unshakable, so meticulous, that when the time came, he would have nowhere to hide. Marcus helped me secure hidden cameras in every corner I could manage, reinforced digital security, and we began tracking Brandon's movements with precision. For the first time since the 2 a.m. knock, I felt a kind of controlled power. Because betrayal this deep doesn't just expose the perpetrator, it creates opportunity. And I was ready. The next morning, I woke up with a clear mission. I couldn't guess anymore. I couldn't assume. I had to know. Marcus and I spent hours reviewing every angle of surveillance footage we could gather. Front door, hallway, backyard, even the mailbox camera. Every frame was scrutinized. Brandon's movements weren't random. They were choreographed, precise, and consistent. I printed screenshots, took timestamps, and began cataloging every intrusion. Marcus set up motion alerts to notify me the instant anyone stepped into my property. I started labeling files like a case investigator. Date, time, action, notes. But it wasn't enough. I needed financial proof. Elena, the private investigator, stepped in fully. I can trace transfers to Brandon, she said calmly. If Adrian's behind this, the paper trail will lead straight to him. Within 2 days, she had dug up multiple payments from Adrian's company, Mercer Strategic Holdings, to Brandon Pike. Recurring transfers, timed perfectly around each break-in. The worst part? Adrian had disguised the payments through shell accounts. Subtle enough that only a trained eye could follow the pattern. I stared at the spreadsheets, red arrows connecting deposits, yellow highlights marking suspicious dates, and in the margin of my notepad, I wrote 3 simple words. He planned this. Next, we needed Brandon on record. Marcus suggested a stakeout. I hesitated at first. Risky, but Elena assured me it would be clean. We tracked him to a storage unit he rented under his own name. Cameras on the street caught him entering and exiting, carrying briefcases and boxes. Elena did a background check. Brandon had no legitimate employment besides consulting for Adrian's company. Every step of his day aligned perfectly with the break-ins. It was methodical, relentless, and chilling. Then came the breakthrough. Brandon made a mistake. He left a flash drive in plain sight during one of the visits. It contained spreadsheets, scanned documents from my home, and detailed notes about my financial records. I held it in my hands and felt the weight of truth. Everything Adrian needed to build a case against me had been gathered, and now I had it. Over the next week, I expanded the investigation. Screenshots of Brandon inside my house, video of him accessing documents, payment transfers from Adrian call logs showing coordination, emails intercepted through Elena's legal channels. Every piece was methodical, undeniable, and legally admissible. For the first time, fear started transforming into control. I began drafting a timeline of events, not just for myself, but for the authorities, for my lawyer, for anyone who might be involved. Every intrusion, every payment, every deceitful filing, documented. I realized something terrifying and liberating at once. Adrian hadn't just trespassed into my life, he'd exposed himself completely. And now, with enough evidence, I could dismantle him. By the end of the week, my plan was set. I would confront him, yes, but only when I had everything in my pocket. Not emotionally, not blindly. I would have all the leverage: cameras, financial records, eyewitnesses, and a timeline so clear that anyone who questioned me would see the truth. Adrian thought he was orchestrating my downfall, but he had no idea I'd already started building my counterattack. And once I was ready, the moment of truth would be irreversible. It started as a simple observation. Brandon's movements were precise, but as Elena and I traced every detail, the realization hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just about financial gain. This wasn't just about power. This was personal. Over the course of a week, Elena uncovered a series of emails between Adrian and Brandon. At first glance, they seemed like standard business communication, but the tone was sharp, calculating. Brandon referred to me as the variable and the obstacle. Adrian's replies were methodical. Make sure the files are accurate. We can't have him questioning anything. I want the house, the trust, everything. Everything. Not just my inheritance. Not just my finances. Everything I had. My independence, my credibility, my peace of mind. My blood ran cold. Then Elena handed me a new file, a PDF of legal drafts Adrian had been preparing in secret. Petitions to challenge my capacity to manage my share of the trust. Plans to question my character to family and the trustee. Provisions to transfer my personal properties into a controlled account, making me dependent on him. And it didn't stop there. There were notes about involving friends and acquaintances, people I trusted, people who would unknowingly corroborate his lies. He had orchestrated a network, a shadow army dedicated to dismantling my life. I sat in my office late that night, watching footage of Brandon walking through my living room, flash drive in hand. I realized something chilling. Every move Adrian made, every document, every intrusion, every calculated lie, had one goal: to erase me. Erase my identity, my agency, my ability to fight back. And yet, the more I saw, the less fear I felt. Because I knew his mistakes. Every transfer could be traced, every intrusion documented, every lie exposed. I just had to wait for the right moment. I began strategizing in detail. Legal protection. Gather undeniable evidence. Documented and timestamped. Ready for authorities and family court. Financial security. Ensure my accounts, investments, and the trust remain under my control. Psychological advantage. Keep Adrian unaware that I knew the full extent. Let him continue his reckless planning. Revealing the network. Identify all parties involved in the scheme, from Brandon to any family members assisting him. Every night, I added notes, mapped connections, and refined my approach. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. I was crafting a trap. I started small. I secured my digital devices with extra layers of encryption, installed hidden cameras in every possible entry point inside the house, changed routines subtly to see if Brandon noticed, began recording all incoming correspondence from Adrian and any third-party communications. By the end of the week, I had a clear understanding of Adrian's entire strategy. He wanted total control. I was no longer the hunted. I was the predator waiting in the shadows. The day finally came. I had waited months, building a dossier so complete it could survive scrutiny from any lawyer, trustee, or court. Every break-in recorded, every transfer traced, every lie documented, every accomplice accounted for. Adrian thought he had me cornered, thought I was vulnerable, thought he was untouchable. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. I arranged a family dinner, a casual, we should talk gathering at my parents' home. Adrian arrived, smiling as always, the golden boy, confident, smooth, oblivious. "Hey, Daniel," he said, shaking my hand. "Long time." I returned the smile, calm, Controlled. Yeah, I said. We need to go over some things. He raised an eyebrow. Oh? I placed a folder on the table. Thick, bulging, weighty. Clarity, I said. Inside were printed screenshots from the camera footage, transaction records linking Adrian to Brandon, call transcripts, legal drafts, and affidavits from Brandon himself. I watched his confidence falter slightly. But he tried to mask it. Daniel, this is ridiculous, he said, scoffing. I didn't flinch. I pressed play on my phone. Brandon's voice filled the room. Just get me what I need, Adrian. I can't lose this. Adrian's face went pale. We need the files from Daniel's house. Every document. The words echoed in the dining room. Perfectly clear. Silence. My parents stared. Shock. Confusion. Hurt. Adrian stumbled over excuses, denials, half-hearted apologies. I slid another folder across the table. Ledger after ledger, showing all the payments to Brandon Pike. All dates correlating with the break-ins. You tried to erase me, I said softly. But in doing so, you exposed yourself. His lips trembled. I had no choice. You had choices, I replied. You chose deception and betrayal. You chose greed over family. And now, everything you built on lies collapses. I had already filed complaints with the authorities. Criminal trespassing, financial fraud, identity intrusion. Brandon had cooperated. Every piece of the network was exposed. By the end of the week, Adrian's business lenders pulled out. His private loans were frozen. His trust petition was nullified. The court froze his attempt to take control of my inheritance. The perfect life he had built for himself crumbled. Brandon Pike faced charges too, but cooperated in exchange for reduced consequences. Friends and family who had unknowingly assisted Adrian were left confused and apologetic. Adrian's reputation, pride, charm, and golden boy image was destroyed. And me? I walked away, calm, collected, stronger. I didn't gloat. I didn't humiliate him in public. I let the evidence speak, the law speak, and the consequences speak. By doing so, I reclaimed everything: financial independence, trust and control over family assets, peace of mind, and finally, the understanding that family isn't about proximity, it's about integrity. Adrian wasn't just defeated, he was exposed. And in that exposure, I found closure. Weeks passed after the confrontation. The tension that had shadowed every moment of my life lifted slowly, almost imperceptibly. I walked through my house one morning, sunlight streaming through the windows, and it felt mine again. Not just the walls, but the air, the floors, the quiet hum of normalcy. I didn't need cameras to feel safe anymore. I had control. I had certainty. I realized something important. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about justice. I had not only protected my life and assets, but I had done it cleanly, legally, and irreversibly. Adrian couldn't spin his lies anymore. The truth was undeniable. And while part of me had once wished for anger, for the thrill of payback, what I felt now was far stronger. Peace. I forgave the illusion of family I thought I had, but I didn't forgive the betrayal. I just let it go, knowing it could no longer harm me. I returned to my routines. Work, workouts, quiet evenings at home. But I did it differently now. Not cautiously, not fearfully. With awareness, with strength, with confidence. I also reconnected with people I had lost along the way. Those who mattered, and those who truly valued honesty and integrity. Financially, legally, and emotionally, I was stronger than I had ever been. Adrian, meanwhile, faced the full weight of his actions. Legal consequences for financial fraud and conspiring with Brandon. Reputation destroyed among business associates and family. Personal relationships fractured. He had tried to dismantle me completely, only to fall backward himself. And while I didn't revel in his pain, I did acknowledge it as just consequences for choices he willingly made. Sitting on my porch one evening, coffee in hand, I realized something. Life doesn't reward ignorance. It doesn't reward fear. It doesn't reward blind trust. It rewards awareness, preparation, courage. And sometimes, the people you think you know best aren't who they seem. But when you face betrayal head-on, with patience and clarity, you can reclaim everything and more. I had my life back, my independence, my peace. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not because I defeated my brother, but because I had built a life that no one could touch.